Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pan Podcast today. It's a limited series podcast, and it's going to be an interview here today with the great and legendary David Alger. David Alger has been with Pan, I believe, since the beginning.
Since 2002.
Since 2002. And today, we're going to just go over the history and the background of what David has experienced doing improv and his improv from his inception. So we're going over the history, David. What drawed you to improv?
So with improv, you have freedom to do and create anything, and you're working with a lot of people, and it's a chance to collaborate. Unlike scripted work where there's a lot of outside work and you have to put in a lot of time, improv, you go, you do your improv, and then you go home, you can move on. So when I first started doing it, I was working for a company and my time was really limited. Improv made it easy, so I could take different improv classes, but when the class was over, there wasn't so much after that.
So you wanted the freedom of not being chained to a script.
I wanted the freedom of not being chained to a script. Like everybody else, I wanted to meet new people. I was new to the Bay Area. And I enjoyed the idea of connecting, the idea of stillness, the idea of there being moments that you could create.
I love that because the moments that we create in improv is really powerful. A lot of shows typically, some of the Bay Area scene is more in the joke realm, but some other theaters have that philosophy of stillness and capturing those moments. Could you explain some of that?
Capturing the moments. So things move, they flow, and then there's space. And in that space, there'll be a connection between people. There'll be a realization from one of the actors as they live their life with a character, where everything kind of slows down and there's this focus that the audience can feel and then they can see. And something's being decided, something's changing, something's evolving. And those moments create, for the audience, the chance to see transformation happening live.
Transformation happening live.
Mm-hmm.
How do you incorporate that into your coaching? Because it's hard to do.
So you have to, the easiest way to describe it is you have to help people slow down. It's a little less of slowing down and more being aware of what's going on and being aware of the fact things are going on. So our tendency is to rush to the end or rush to the next moment. And the more people can sit with something, the more they can lose themselves in the character's thoughts and the character's world and the interplay between the characters, the slower it's going to get, the more focused it's going to get. If you're looking for a punchline or a funny out, then you're just looking for that thing. You're not experiencing the moments quite as much because you're more product-driven rather than process-driven.
Yeah, explain that process from initially coming to Pan Theater and then working with you throughout the years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the process. I mean, people come into the theater, they take the dojo class, they audition for a troupe if they got some prior experience, they take a 101 class, and they put in the work, they do the exercises, they show up, they do a lot of scenes, and they gain experience. They're accumulating experience over time. As they accumulate more experience, as they go through a process themselves, they bring that back into the things they're doing, meaning they allow the scenes to be a process of discovery. And it takes time because you have to become more comfortable on stage. You have to become more comfortable with your scene partners. You have to learn to trust yourself more and to trust the sense of there not being anywhere that you need to go to right away. There's no finish.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you say there's no finish, because this process is always ever evolving, ever expanding, and like as a character, especially for me, it helps so much just being able to be myself, be in the moment, which is extremely hard to do, and just. How you started here, but you mentioned you had prior acting training. So
Sure. So when I was in college the first time, I majored in history and theater. I had as many credits in history as I did theater. I had a friend that was a paratrooper, former karate instructor, and we were talking one day, and I asked him, how can you do that, or how could you do that? And he said, I said, I'm afraid of heights. And he said, well, I'm afraid of heights too. That's why he did it. That's why he became a paratrooper. And for me, I wanted to find something similar, something I was afraid of doing that could help me grow and challenge myself. And that was getting up in front of people. So I started taking one acting class, then another. Then I wound up getting a major, history/theater. And then after graduating, I moved back towards the martial arts. I didn't stay with the theater so much. Eventually, I went to graduate school. I came out to the Bay Area. The best job offer I had at the time was out here. And I hadn't done theater stuff for, I don't know, at that point, maybe 8-9 years. And one of my friends mentioned an improv group in Fort Mason. And he said, oh, we should check it out. Maybe it'd be a fun way to meet people, to make some friends, etc. So I started going to that. It was a group called the Flying Apples. We met at the front door of Fort Mason, and then we wandered into one of the rooms that was open, and we'd do improv for 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours. And there was no instruction. It was just everyone sharing a different game or a different exercise. And that was how I really got started in improv, through the Flying Apples, yeah. Eventually, some other people joined that had more formal training in improv. And then that made me kind of interested in getting more formal training myself, or getting formal training in improv as opposed to just scripted work. I went to classes at BATS, Bay Area Theater Sports. I took classes down the South Bay with Life Plays, and I did a bunch of classes with them. Did some classes with Comedy Sports. I had auditioned for the Oakland Playhouse troupe, which I think is now moved to San Francisco. It's Big City Improv. And the first hour of the audition went really well. I thought it was going to be an hour. They asked me to stay for another hour. I was starting to get tired because I was geared up for an hour, yeah. Then they asked me to stay for a third hour. And by that time, I had used up all my energy. So what was going really, really well, by the time their final cast members showed up, I was kind of out of energy. And so I didn't get asked to join the group. They really, they thanked me. They said, you should audition again, that kind of thing. But there was someone that was looking to start an improv group, and Skip Evans, he advertised back on Craigslist back in the day. He got a bunch of people together. I think there were about 40 of us. And this was up on his office on Martin Luther King and 40th or 41st. And we talked. He talked about what he wanted to do. He had been an improviser, one of the founding members of Dad's Garage in Atlanta. And, we had a couple meetings later. In each meeting, there were fewer and fewer people. And Skip was having trouble finding a place to actually hold rehearsals, because at that time, there weren't so many spaces. So I did the work. I went to a bunch of places. I connected with people. I found a rehearsal space that was at 21 Grand Art Studio. They were willing to rent 1 or 2 nights a week to us. And, they were doing their art show stuff or just working on their art. And we would do our rehearsals for 2-3 hours. And fast forward a few years, we found our own space, a small dedicated space, maybe about 300 square feet. We did practices there. Then eventually we did some shows at the Egypt Theater in East Oakland, started doing shows at Fort Mason at the Blueberry School of Rock and Roll. They had a theater that we rented out. I think last point was every Saturday on a yearly basis for a few years. Then eventually we found our own theater space, meaning a space we could have both shows and classes. on Broadway, 2135 Broadway, and then through the years. And during that time, I took classes, once again, life plays. We had Doug Cassell, who had been an improv director for Sue Walden's Improv Works. He came in, he directed the group for, I think, 2 to 3 years. Chris Hayes was one of the early improvisers. He directed the group. At one point, we had 2 groups. Al Bowen directed one of the groups, and Chris and Al had both had a lot of experience down in Los Angeles. They had worked with, Al had worked with Second City, Chris had worked with I.O. back in the early days, and they had both done a lot of commercials. Al had been on General Hospital, is it? And stuff like that. So they were part of the group, and we'd do these shows. We had 2 groups at the time. Then eventually I went down to LA to take some classes at I.O. And after that, I did that for about 6 to 8 months. Decided that I could actually bring a couple of the instructors up here, and it would be easier because everyone else would be exposed to the knowledge, the training. So I brought up David Rosowski quite a few times. I think I brought him up every Wednesday for a month, and it was capped by a weekend workshop and another weekend workshop. Brought up Shuli Cohen, who was one of my teachers down at I.O. She did a weekend workshop. Jimmy Corain, the improv nerd, we brought him in for a couple workshops. Various people from UCB Touring Company, and then there were various other people we brought in from time to time. Aretha Sills. I went back to retake all my undergraduate acting classes. I did that at San Francisco State, so I redid all the acting 1, 2, 3, voice, etc. Eventually, I started taking Meisner classes. I went through a Meisner training program. I took maybe the first level class about 15 or 20 times because it was the most useful for improv, and I did the other parts of the program as well several times, and then just doing it again and again and again over the years.
Incredible breadth of just improv and acting experience. How has that created the offstage David versus the onstage David?
Sure. So for every step or moment of progress on stage, you usually have to change and evolve off stage as well. So one of the things, is I learned not to mumble as much, which made a huge difference. So before I started doing improv, a lot of times I'd go to the cafe, Starbucks, wherever, and I'd ask for an order, and the person would say, "Can you speak up a little bit?" And the voice training helped in particular. The idea of yes and, the idea that you do something, you assume it's going to work, and then you just deal with the consequences. It opens up doors because you'll do a lot of things you've never done before. I went to Japan, I started business, I kept on, growing pan theater. I did things that I didn't think I could do, but I followed the impulse and then saw what could happen. And sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does, but in the process you're always learning and changing. So it opens doors, it opens doors.
Well, I think what's more powerful, like you said, it opens doors, but not only off stage, but within inside you. Mm-hmm. So this is a very self-reflective art form because you can experience so much, and especially at Pan, you get so much time. You can experience so much that it kind of just it will kind of change your perception. I think that's what for me, that's what has happened. I'm no longer as shielded as I was. I'm more willing to jump off and try something rather than be this isn't for me. Or I couldn't be that, or being envious of people who have stage presence, the charisma.
So you learn to identify, we call it blocking in a scene when someone doesn't take an offer, doesn't accept their reality. But I think you learn to identify your own personal blocks more. So you find when you're stopping something or not doing something because you're scared or because you're uncertain, rather than there being a real reason not to do something. So you go through more, you do more, Yeah, but knowing that you're blocking or knowing that you're negating before you even start to do something, it allows you to be aware of that and then make a different choice or a different decision. And I think improv is basically decisions. Yeah, decision, 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 made really fast, typically organically.
Typically, what do you mean by typically organically?
You have a feeling and you make a decision rather than being very logical and step by step and going through it, going your little sheet with your pros and your cons. Yeah, you feel what's right. Yeah, you feel, okay, I'm not doing this, I'm resisting this, but there's nothing really there for me to not do it. So you feel that block. So it's the feeling.
The feeling of improv. So chills. The feeling of improv. For a student who's coming in at the 101 level.
101.
How do you explain that to them?
So when someone first starts to do it, you have to help them become really gentle with themselves and to just do it and not attach good or bad. So for every good scene you do, you have to do hundreds, maybe thousands of bad scenes. For every moment you don't hold, there are going to be moments you do hold, but you have to do a lot of moments that don't quite make it, right? So you're building experience. So someone in 101, they have to try, meaning being open and doing whatever the exercise is. If they get too thinky, too logical, they don't do, then they won't learn. Yeah.
Yeah, improv is actually very physical, and I enjoy that aspect a lot because I come from a rugby background, so I've always had something physical to like do after work or after school or after whatever, and like that always has been very important to me. So like physical is so good, but just people are afraid to do the physical. Especially me, when I first started, I was afraid to do physical stuff. But as I got more comfortable. But how do you explain that? Because it was hard for me to really grasp like reps, physical, do.
So a lot of times it's less about explaining and more about creating experience. So you create experience or moments where people do things, and as they gain more and more experience, then you can start to explain it. It will make more sense. But without the experience, it's just going to be this thought process that's going to keep them from doing something if they're afraid. So, by getting up, by trying, by doing, and not thinking about whether it's good or bad, not thinking about whether it's perfect or not perfect, every time you're doing it, you're becoming more free in a way. You're expanding your physical range, your willingness to do things. And then you start to get into it. You start to want to do it more, and you start to want to do it better. And it's the practice of doing that allows people to get better. So, the 101 person, they do all the basic exercises. But the people at the other levels do a lot of the same exercises, but they can do them on deeper and deeper levels because their range is expanded, their experience is expanded. Quite honestly, they're thinking less, they're doing more.
Whew. Thinking less, doing more. Incredible. I just think that's the fun of improv, being into the like, what? we're doing this now. Okay, we're doing this now. I mean, explain how much fun that is for you.
So when you're doing improv, you think you're going here in a scene, but there's something that gets your attention or you notice, so you start to explore this thing. And then something happens from that, so now you're exploring this new thing. And you wind up in a place that you could have never predicted, and it's only by just following and following and following and flowing and doing. And the end result, whether it's dramatic or comedic or absurd, it's just there, yeah? And then the lights come down.
New scene. That process is just hard, especially at the 101 level, and even transitioning into 201. where it's just like, I have to do this more, but I have life and stuff, but I love this so much, but I want to do it more.
Yeah.
Pan Theater is so open to all people, all walks of life, no matter what, that it allows people, say from McDonald's to CEO, top level, CE level executive, to come and do it where they can still have a day job. Like, what inspired you to keep it that way?
So I thought of it as, well, first of all, when I came out to the Bay Area, this was 2000, there weren't really many places in the East Bay to do improv. And even in the entire Bay Area, there were only maybe a handful of places you could actually do improv. So my original goal was to create a place in the East Bay where people could practice, perform, and do improv. And over the years, you see people come in, and we had a lot of people that had done improv previously, maybe in San Francisco, maybe in Los Angeles, maybe in Boston. And they were looking for a place that they could do improv here. And that was one of the things I wanted to provide. So back in the day, we actually used to have on one of the posters or flyers, you're taking classes at Boston, Improv Boston, or Improv Asylum in Boston, or some of the other groups, please come out, try out for our groups, you can do improv with us. We wanted to be a place where people could mix and people could have a 9 to 5 and still do something creative. There's Frank Zappa, his daughter, Moon Unit Zappa, there's a quote from her. And she said, if you do what you like some of the time, you'll be happy at least some of the time. But if you never do what you like, you won't be happy. And I think so many people think it's an either-or thing, but there are ways of balancing your life. Just because you can't, because your family responsibilities, your work or whatever, you can't run off to New York or LA or Chicago, well, that doesn't mean there isn't a space for you to do it, and that the life you have can't be infused with more creativity. And that's what we provide. I mean, people, like you said, they may be a CEO, maybe an accountant, maybe a waiter, a waitress. This is a place they can come, and once they're in the door, everybody's at the same level, meaning we don't talk about your outside work. You're here, we're doing improv, yeah? And everybody has the same abilities, everybody has the same chances if they put in the work. I mean, people have different backgrounds, so for some people it's easier, some people it's harder, but you can all learn it and do it, and then it's up to you how much you put into it.
That's why I love Pan Theater. It's so special because there is allowances here. I don't think you would get it at any other theater because improv is commitment. It's a lifelong commitment, in my opinion. David, I think you have anything else to say?
So I think the things I would say to people that are thinking about doing improv or maybe coming here to do improv, first you have to be really gentle with yourself and very forgiving. I mean, things are generally baby steps in the beginning till you do them more and more. And as you give yourself that freedom, that permission to make mistakes, to try, to learn, if this is your thing, then you'll want to do it more, but there's going to be ups and downs through the times, yeah? So your first 2 years, the growth is amazing because you've never done it perhaps, and so you're growing. But after a while, the growth isn't as much, and that's when you kind of decide if this is going to be the thing I want to do or not. And you stay with it, and you make incremental progress, and then, 5 years has happened, and you're so much better than you were. 10 years, and then you're like, I can't believe I've been doing it for 10 years. And it just becomes a part of you and how you embrace life. Even if you take a break at that point, the way you approach your world is forever different. Yeah. So I would say to people that, whether they're in the Bay Area or somewhere else, try it and see if it's something that you enjoy. I mean, there's a lot of doors that it'll open up. Yeah.
Hell yeah. David Alger. Thank you guys so much for listening to a Pan Special podcast. We have classes, dojos, and shows here at Pan Theater Please check our website, pantheater.com, for more information, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you, everyone.